Okay, here we are. Another video on Field of Play TV. We've got a very special guest, Max. Thank you for jumping on.
Thank you, sir. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you?
I'm as good as one can be after losing a local derby. But no, I'm good. I'm good. Keeping busy with work, you know.
Yeah. Now talking about that derby. Let's get right into it. Very positive result the week before against Arsenal. Obviously, big game at Anfield. They've not been playing too well. You guys came off the back of a good result. Was you expecting more, or was it a bit of same old, same old?
No, well, you've hit the nail on the head there. It certainly was same old, you know. Coming off, as you mentioned, that Arsenal result, you would have thought that Everton would have gone into that game at Anfield with the same approach, almost with the same sort of fearlessness, intense pressing. You know, trigger as soon as touch at the back. Like they were kind of fragile at the back, Liverpool. Press forced them into errors. Try and create chances. But unfortunately, Everton didn't seem to do that. And I thought the phase of play which epitomised not just the game itself, but derby games at Anfield for the last almost 20 years. It was that, that corner comes in, Dwight McNeil, James Tarkowski hits the post. Everton don't react. Liverpool react. Ball goes down the other end. And Salah puts it in the back of the net. And as I say, in a nutshell, I feel like that's how the majority of Anfield derbies have gone. Certainly over the course of my lifetime, anyway.
Is that the frustration, though, that it was 2 goals that could have been so easily avoided? Or are you more frustrated with the performance?
Well, of course, I think the result from an Evertonian's perspective does hurt because, it's a local derby. I'm sure you lads know yourself,
Yeah.
No matter where you are in the table, it's almost bragging rights and things of that nature. So, of course, the results do always sting when they don't go your way. But that being said, and I know Liverpool are only about 9th, so it sounds a bit ridiculous to say this, but Everton's season isn't going to be defined by results against teams in the upper half of the league. The current predicament that Everton find themselves in, they need to pick up points from teams in and around them. So, put that one behind you, and all eyes got to be on Leeds at the weekend. That's a huge game.
No, huge.
Did you go into that Liverpool derby based on the way that they've been playing, based on everything that's been going on around Liverpool? Did you go into the derby this time thinking, yeah, we could get a result, or was you just thinking, wasn't really sure?
Not necessarily. I think the majority of Evertonians that I spoke to was obviously a touch of optimism off the back of the Arsenal result. That being said, with the exception of that win at home against Arsenal, Everton are in poor form themselves. Under Frank Lampard, he lost 9 of his last 12 Premier League games. With the exception, as you say, he goes, Dyche comes in, and that new manager bounce, as it's called. Again, but you would have liked to have seen that attitude carried over into the game at Anfield. But as I say, it's almost psychological with Everton, I feel, when they go to Anfield. They don't seem to rise to the occasion, whereas Liverpool always certainly do. Where they go off the back of this, we don't know, as I say. But I'm sure it'll give them a bit of momentum moving forward as well.
No, of course. I'll rewind, because I'll be honest, Everton for me have been one of the stories of the season. Not in a not necessarily a positive light, but just the aura around them, the fans' unrest with the board, with the players. I'll rewind all the way back to the end of last season when you survived against Palace. I think you came back from 2-0 down. For me, I'm not an Evertonian. I'm not really clued up about it. But those celebrations that day, correct me if I'm wrong, I was slightly confused because Everton, for me, big club, and they want to be. I've always felt like they wanted to basically do what Newcastle are doing at the moment and be in and around the top 6. And just seeing that reaction when it was such a poor season did really confuse me. So was I wrong to be that confused, or is it different when you're down there? Or
don't get me wrong, I am in the minority that I'm on your side with this.
okay.
I don't believe in jumping on the pitch and running about like you've just won a trophy when you've just narrowly avoided relegation.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, the circumstances and the narrative around Everton for the last couple of years since the departure of Carlo Ancelotti has just been so dire. As you mentioned, the fans have not been happy, and certainly under Rafael Benitez, Everton were only going in one direction. Make no mistake about it. The run of losses, the players' confidence as a collective was completely gone, and they just slept. They slipped from one defeat to another.
Yeah.
Lampard come in, and not to say he completely revolutionised the football club, because fast forward 1 year and he's no longer in the job. But in the short term, he achieved that goal of staying in the Premier League, which, as you mentioned, for Everton Football Club, historically very successful. I do think it is quite embarrassing. So it's an embarrassing situation, I believe, for a club like Everton to be in. But we've seen it before. I think predominantly with a lot of other northern clubs, maybe not the same size as Everton, but you think of the likes of Bolton, Blackburn, Bury now, who have obviously reformed. Poor governance and poor ownership structures have led them down a path that has been really damaging. And one hopes that Everton, with the history that they have in the English game, can turn it around before it gets to those depths.
So you mentioned Rafa Benitez. The least said, the better on that appointment. How did you feel when Lampard took over? Did you? It's a weird one because obviously some people say he failed at Chelsea, some say he done okay. What was your initial feeling when that went through?
Well, to take a broader perspective, I feel like the last handful of Everton managers, they deserve respect, and I'll even put Rafael Benitez in that bracket by virtue of what they've achieved in the game. Carlo Ancelotti, multiple-time Champions League winner, won a host of domestic honours wherever he's been. Rafael Benitez won La Liga with Valencia, obviously achieved what he did with Liverpool too. And then Frank Lampard, arguably one of the greatest English football players ever. As you say, every club that I feel like Frank Lampard's been to as a manager, he's had to deal with unusual circumstances. If you think, Derby weren't in the best shape financially, and he still did decent with them. He had a transfer ban to deal with Chelsea, which is unusual. And then he comes in, as we've talked about, the narrative and the aura around Everton at the moment. It's not the best place to be. So for a young manager to come in, he was up against it from the moment he walked through the door. Don't get me wrong, and it's a shame because the consensus is Everton fans, they didn't dislike Frank Lampard at all. He was a complete breath of fresh air in comparison to Rafael Benitez. You listen to a lot of Lampard's press conferences, or even his podcast appearances that he's made. He's the first to talk about honesty and accountability and shouldering his burden wherever he is. Whereas that was the polar opposite with Benitez. Benitez would look to shift the blame to other people, to the players, to the fans, to the ownership structure, which isn't to say that some blame doesn't lie with them, but just the complete neglect and to deflect responsibility away from Benitez the way he did. That's part of what didn't sit right with Evertonians. But yeah, listen, Everton fans liked Lampard and were sorry that it didn't work out. But in the situation that Everton are in, things need to change, and they do change fast.
Saying that, is that obviously Sean Dyche included now, with the ownership and the board above, does it well, United fans have faced similar feeling, is that whoever is in charge is just they can't really win. They can't really achieve what they really want to achieve because of those above them.
Before you answer that quickly, sorry, Sanch, was you happy with the Sean Dyche appointment based on his credentials in regards to, you know, saving Burnley when they've always looked like the side that's going to be facing relegation? Was you happy with that appointment when that happened?
Well, interestingly, if you are going to talk about Sean Dyche's credentials, I mean, if you look at the past 7 Everton managers that it is now, out of those, the manager that achieved the highest place league finish was Sam Allardyce, who finished 8th. And in that season, Sean Dyche's Burnley finished 7th and got Europa League football. But that being said, for me, the Sean Dyche appointment did have a feel of when Everton appointed Sam Allardyce. It's we need a pragmatist who's able to get the best out of this group of players that have buried so many managers quickly. You know, that pragmatic approach, the methods. I'm sure you've seen things like the bleep test, making them train in shorts and socks that are the equivalent of you know, your match kit. Things like that, almost to stick a rocket up the behind of some of the players. So whilst I'm not overly enthusiastic about the appointment of Sam Allardyce, Sean Dyche,
I'm trying to go back to that place.
Tell you what, mate, I'd snap your hands off for a place finish. Tell you that now. But listen, it's another one of those appointments that a needs must. Whether he does that job in the short term remains to be seen. And there are a lot of points to play for. So as I say, just put that Derby result behind you and go again.
Is that how do you feel though? Because given I completely relate with how you're feeling in terms of the short term. I'm not too sure about the long term.
Yeah.
But talking of the short term, for me, I don't know if you have the same feeling. I feel you 100% stay up.
Really? Well, do you watch Everton?
I didn't feel like that beforehand because obviously I do watch Everton when I can, and it was really bad, and Monday was as bad if we're being honest. But I feel like you have a core group of players there that if he gets them playing like he did against Arsenal, I feel like you'll be more than fine.
Yeah, well, that Arsenal result and that performance is the blueprint now. Can you look to replicate that in the games that are to come? My biggest concern, as I mentioned, it's not necessarily this group of players, but the players that have come through the doors at Everton and ultimately left over the case of the last 7 years or so. I've seen off so many managers, but not only that, them themselves have been brought in by so many different managers and so many different directors of football. So, you know, you're going back to Seamus Coleman, who's the captain now, who came through under David Moyes. You've got, you know, Tom Davies, who missed a massive chance at Anfield on Monday, who was given his debut under Roberto Martinez. Going forward from that, you've got Ronald Koeman, as we mentioned, Allardyce, Marco Silva, Carlo Ancelotti. All of these players, you know, and not to mention that I think Everton were quite late to the party in terms of jumping on that more European model of a director of football. But when they did, they appointed Steve Walsh, who was a chief scout at Leicester, which isn't to say he's not a fantastic scout, but what he isn't is a director of football. So you've given a scout a director of football job, which he
that's Ranić all over.
Ultimately proven, you know, that inept at his job, and some would argue that combination of Steve Walsh and Ronald Koeman as the manager has ultimately set the club back years. So just to come back to your question, in the short term, I'd probably say I am more optimistic with Sean Dyche at the helm in terms of Everton's survival chances. But the fact that they didn't deliver on the promise of getting a centre forward in, when by the looks of things, Everton really need a centre forward.
Well, you see who you played on Monday. He was at Sunderland, to be fair to him, and he got called back. It's nothing against the kid, but it does show that in a big game like that, what happens.
Does exactly, mate. And when the players around the centre forward don't contribute all that many goals as well, it's hugely damaging. So as I mentioned, it remains to be seen. But just almost from the professional standpoint, all subjective feelings aside, a club the size, with the reach of Everton, with the history of Everton, to ultimately face going down into the Championship when, neither of us have seen it. The three of us haven't seen Everton get relegated. I think that the last time was 69, 70 years ago. Even that seemed like a one-off because they bounced straight back up by winning the Division 2. So, it's a really daunting prospect that as a fan of football, I hope they get themselves out of.
So going back to what I asked, you just reeled off 7-8 managers, and if I'm honest, they're not. Some would say so, but you see what Marco Silva's doing now with Fulham. Obviously, Sam Allardyce, you said he finished 8th that season. Frank Lampard's done okay. We obviously know about Rafael Benitez, even though in terms of the history, it was a bonkers decision. But in terms of what he's achieved, we know what he's achieved, and Carlo Ancelotti. So is it that feel where because of the ownership and the board, there's that whoever we appoint, we're not really going to get where we want to get to unless we find a David Moyes that performs out of this world. A bit like Fergie, it doesn't matter who's the board or who's the owner. We're gonna get a team playing anyways. But not everyone's like that. Not everyone's built like that. So is that because we've had that feeling for ages? Whoever's appointed doesn't really matter because he's not going to get supported. He's not going to get whatever. So is it that same feeling? And looking in January as well, like you're the only club that didn't do any business in January. And then I'm hearing reports about free agents that you're looking for. It's like, is any manager that comes into that dugout fighting a losing battle already?
The short answer to that is yes, because if you almost go back to 2016 when the influx of investment came in from Farhad Moshiri, there were talks of numerous other consortiums and investors being interested in buying Everton Football Club, but Bill Kenwright, who is the chairman of Everton Football Club, chose the owner who was best for him, which meant essentially he chose the owner that would allow him to remain as chairman of the football club.
Yeah.
So the analogy that I like to use is, to show the similarities is that appointment of Rafael Benitez. Obviously, Harold, you pointed out that his history is one of the things that raises eyebrows in terms of why he was appointed as a manager. But I don't care about that. There have been players that have played for both Everton and Liverpool and vice versa.
Yeah.
The thing is with me, so historically, Benitez did well. Valencia, Liverpool, has managed Real Madrid, Inter Milan. Did what he did at Newcastle, won the championship with Newcastle. Then he went to China, and what that says to me is that is a man who is not confident that his coaching methods and his approach to management work in modern day football in Europe. So,
fair enough.
If you go back to Bill Kenwright's involvement at Everton Football Club, he's been on the board, I believe, since 1989, and over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, he's eventually increased his shares and launched a consortium which ultimately bought him the majority shares in the football club, ultimately with him resulting in being chairman of the football club, majority shareholder, who is now obviously Farhad Moshiri, who's now bought out the majority of Bill's shares. However, do you know what Bill Kenwright does for a living.
Enlighten me. That's why we're here.
He's a West End theatre producer. The man produces like musicals and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and please forgive me. He's now 77 years old. What is a 77-year-old West End producer doing as chairman as a Premier League football club? Like,
exactly.
How does that work? You know,
it sounded like a famous guy, Ed Woodward.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing. You got bankers handling things that are meant to be on the pitch, things that you're meant to have the know-how, have guys in place to be able to assist you in that kind of direction. So listen, I feel your pain. Like honestly, like I feel it. Trust me. It's a weird one.
So yeah, I think that is I think that's the majority of Evertonians' main grief with the situation is that whilst Everton are building a brand new stadium which looks absolutely incredible and is fastly approaching completion, Everton are still years behind their competitors. Growing up, I viewed Everton's competitors as directly over the park as Liverpool, as Chelsea, as Tottenham. Maybe not so Manchester United because Manchester United were very dominant when I was growing up. It was either Manchester United or Arsenal or Manchester United and Chelsea, but then Chelsea dropped off a bit, and Everton always seemed to be in contention for the European places around those.
Yeah.
Where you look at those teams now, they're still in and around the Champions League places, and other clubs have come into the league and completely succeeded Everton in terms of you look at Brighton, Brentford, and that all points to the ownership and governance at those football clubs are updated and have models of governance that work within modern football.
Exactly.
And this isn't the case at Everton, which I know it's a very long-winded answer, but that is where the majority of the frustration comes from.
Of course, until they're gone, you don't see how you get back to, unless you get a manager that is overperforms to a crazy level. That the feeling is that until they're gone or until there's a different structure in place, European football is a pipe dream.
Ultimately, because ultimately football is a results industry, and of course you want to operate soundly as a footballing and sporting entity in a business. But not only that, Everton Football Club, any football club, their main product is what they serve up to their audience and their fans of a weekend in terms of their result, how they play on a football pitch. Now, just in terms of a football team, and then this coming back full circle to the Merseyside derby, although Liverpool are a team out of form, if it came down to a technical game of football, 11v11, in terms of the individual talent and when they pull together as a collective, Liverpool are a better football team than Everton. And this all comes down to, Jurgen Klopp's revolution of recruitment, the players that he's got in, the playing style, the values that he's implemented into the group. That I don't see any progression in that regard in terms of Everton. As I mentioned, there's been so many managers have come and went with players that have also come and went, that those sorts of a playing style doesn't seem evident to me. And I guess that's one of the challenges that Sean Dyche has now in terms of discovering who he believes is his best starting 11, but not only that, the starting 11 that he can trust to deliver.
Talking about personnel and starting 11, Antony Gordon. A lot of noise, there was obviously that video that surfaced about in his car and the abuse that he got. How do you feel just about the all-round situation? Because obviously he grew up an Evertonian. He came through the ranks, and he started off pretty well. He was subject of a Chelsea interest in the summer, didn't happen, ended up staying, started the season pretty fairly well. And obviously it just fell off a cliff. what was your feeling towards him? Did you feel the way the fans approached him, and especially Yerry Mina, was that the right way to go about things? Because obviously, us as fans, if we're going week in, week out and we're seeing performances below the standard, then I feel like we have the right to frustrate our anger at the players because they're the ones playing on the football pitch. But was that the correct way to do it? And is there any hard feelings now that he's obviously gone, or the way he acted, or the way he performed?
No, well, in terms of what you talk about, the events that followed the loss to Brighton at Goodison, any large gathering of people, there's always going to be a few dickheads in the group. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we live in an age now where you've got social media essentially amplifies everything. So any conversation with someone, there's enough chance, particularly if you stop a car or if you interact with a footballer, there's enough chance that's going to get recorded and that's going to get sent all around the world. This followed, by the way, a peaceful protest, which arguably should have took the headlines, but a couple of lads decided to block off a road, and that's what ultimately resulted in getting headlines. That's the first thing they talked to me about, as opposed to the peaceful protest.
Yeah.
So that's that put to bed. That was just a few dickheads not knowing how to talk to people properly. But in terms of Antony Gordon, I can't help but just say it was good business for a young player. 40 million with 5 million in add-ons for a player that's only scored, I think, 7 goals in over 70 appearances. Somebody said to me what they view this transfer is, it's ultimately Newcastle peacocking a little bit and showing, like, look at what we can afford now. They're not buying a finished product in Antony Gordon. They're investing in potential. Whether he delivers on that potential and whether Newcastle can get that potential out of him, we'll see over the coming years. I think Antony is a smart lad. I think because I remember seeing an interview with him not too long after he signed a contract extension with Everton a year or two ago, saying that he knows that he needs to up his numbers, so his stats, his goals, his assists. So he knows that, and I'm sure that's something that he's going to work on moving forward in his career. But in terms of how I feel about the departure, well, as I say, I do think it's good business. I think he's nowhere near, and I mean this emphatically, he's nowhere near the talent level of a Wayne Rooney. But the nature in which he left reminded me an awful lot of a Wayne Rooney in 2003. Now, I was only a baby at that time, but when I've read back on it, Wayne Rooney left Everton with a day or two to go of the transfer window. A sum of money that they ultimately couldn't spend because there wasn't enough time to spend it. It mirrors the Antony Gordon situation for me. So in terms of his good graces, I don't think he'd left it. He's not left it with handshakes and a smile. He's embittered by that. But as I say, I'm vastly of the opinion that unless you're going to reinvest that money smartly, like a Borussia Dortmund, or an Ajax, or a team that knows how to reinvest money, there's no point in selling your best players, because, as we mentioned,
very true.
in terms of the games on the weekend, your best players are those who are going to deliver. So if you haven't got your best players on the pitch, what are you going to do? That being said, as I say, Antony Gordon, he's not in the same bracket of these young players that are delivering week in, week out. He's not like an Erling Haaland. He's not like a Kylian Mbappe. He's not like a Gonzalo Ramos at Benfica.
I think the feeling is like he wasn't the do or die in terms of your relegation battle, and I'm a bit stuck in between, because obviously he has talent. The talent is clear, but if you are going to sell him, you would have liked to reinvest it back into the squad. But obviously, like I said earlier, you were the only club that didn't spend. So in January, so it was a bit of a difficult one. But same token, I still don't think he would have made that much of a difference if he had stayed. And I feel that the players that Dyche has under his control right now is probably better suited to him.
Would you not have preferred? Would you not have preferred to sell him in the summer when there was more time to invest? When Chelsea came in, and Tottenham was also, correct me if I'm wrong, rumored to be interested for him.
They were all just hearsay and rumours. I remember Frank Lampard coming out in a press conference and saying that there's been no bid. So I don't know if any of those bids actually materialised. I know that Frank Lampard really did like Anthony Gordon, and I think he developed a close relationship with Anthony Gordon. So I think moving forward, if in Frank Lampard's eyes, he wanted to keep Anthony Gordon with that group of players and work with him and develop him. Sean Dyche obviously doesn't have that luxury now with him going to Newcastle. So as you say, it's nice to know that Harold's got confidence in this group of players that Sean Dyche has got. I'm not sure I'm on the same level in that respect. But as I say, there's a lot of points to play for. Just see what happens.
There's been a lot of few weird statements in regards to relegation. And I think it's the worst possible thing that could happen to you guys, if I'm honest. There's been a lot of statements where they've said, the Championship might be good for Everton. But I think that's part underestimating the league and part two underestimating the situation that you find yourselves in. I just don't think it will be... I think this relegation battle is deeper for Everton. It's not like a Watford or a Norwich where I think they will bounce straight back up. So I feel like it's deeper in regards to if you do go down, we're in big trouble now. So on the same token, I do maybe looking back understand those celebrations because I don't see a way back. Whereas if there's the survival, and obviously we've seen now this is the second season in a row. It's probably, well, in my lifetime, it's the first time that it's happened where Everton have been down there probably for successive seasons. So you'd like to think that maybe the people upstairs will wake up a little bit and kind of see that this club shouldn't be where it should be. So this season more than last, I think it's a greater battle to stay in the league, and it'll be probably a greater achievement.
No, I agree with that statement 100%, and I certainly agree with it. I do, whoever you're hearing those statements off, are completely underestimating the toll that relegation takes on a football club. Just going off what I talk about in terms of how I view this group of players that are currently at Everton, I am not sure how many of those players would stick around if Everton did get relegated.
You don't think because would they have takers? Because we have to see that the performances they've been putting in.
That's a fair point.
It's hard for me to see a lot of them going.
No,
a lot,
100%.
A lot of them said when because one of the fans asked Yerry Mina whether he'll stay if he goes to the Championship, and a lot of them were saying Yerry Mina won't stick around. I don't see why he won't stick around personally. I think where would he go?
No, that's a solid statement because, like we mentioned earlier, in terms of the recruitment at Everton, one of the biggest detriments to Everton's recruitment strategy is the players that they brought in haven't had resale value. They haven't really delivered to the potential that they've initially promised or have promised the previous clubs. So I do think that's a good shout. But at the same time, if Everton were to go down, I couldn't see them bouncing straight back up either. As I say, I think it underestimates that league and how hard it is to get out of it once you are sucked down into it. You add to that Bramley-Moore Dock, which I think it'd be a black mark on the history of the football club if they were to play their first season at Bramley-Moore Dock in the Championship. Not only that, but the financial limitations that would put on the club. It's just huge. It's huge, and it's a black cloud that hangs over the head of the football club at the moment.
We'll end on a positive note with regards to personnel again.
Okay.
I'm gonna do no. is that the kind of player that you guys should be? And I'm not talking about his style of play, because obviously very good player, but I mean in terms of the attitude, because I feel like same with United over the past years, some people come here for a holiday, and when the going gets tough, they don't fancy it. And that's how I feel like with some Everton signings and players, it's been the same thing. Whereas this person, there was interest in him in January. He said, no, don't want to go. I want to fight. I want to keep Everton in the league. Is that more so the attitude that you want coming into your football club?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the lad's he's like 6'4", handsome as anything, and he can sing.
Yeah.
I mean, like this lad is just an absolute diamond, you know. It's that attitude. I mean, I remember hearing Simon Jordan refer to Anthony Gordon as a rat leaving a sinking ship. It did make me laugh. So on the flip side of that, you've got people like Amadou Onana who's like, I'm gonna stick around and I'm gonna be here for the fight. That's not to say he won't be playing European football next season, by the way, because that's just modern football, you know.
Oh, no, but that's fine. I feel like January is a different ball game, anyways, because you're leaving halfway through the season. He joined in the summer, right? I believe so. If that was to happen, that would have been that would have been a blow. I think that compared to Anthony Gordon, that would have been a blow. So a lot of people are interested in him. And he's a talented boy. He plays for Boardroom. So, yeah, I feel like that is the kind of player and attitude that that needs to be coming through the door if Everton would have any chance of staying up
and the way he actually signed for the club. Because I knew about him prior to him signing for Everton, and I knew West Ham tried to come in, and he late hijacked, whatever you want to call it, and he chose Everton. And at the time, I was thinking, wow, it's a strange one based on Everton's finish last season and West Ham, respectively, for why he obviously chose it, which was, you know, maybe to work with Frank Lamp's midfielder, things like that. So, having a player like that that's showing it all, pumping up the fans, you love to see it, man. Honestly, man. I feel like every club.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head there. You're exactly right. And one of the things that has been lost at Everton Football Club over the number of years and the number of managers, the number of players, is that identity between and the unity between the fans and the players. Some would argue that the players on the pitch don't represent the fans how they would like to be represented. As you said, Harold, there were some players that Everton have had over the years that fans would argue just didn't give 100%, you know? So breath of fresh air that it is to see such a prospect such as Amadou Onana come in, give it his all. He empties the tank every time he plays.
Every time.
He's one of those rare positives that you mentioned that is developing a connection with the fans. But as I say, it's modern football. He's going to have his suitors, and whether Everton can keep hold of him, it's another remain to be seen.
Another question. One question: yes or no? Do Everton stay in the Premier League this season?
Yeah, we got to be positive, haven't we?
Yeah. No, I think you do.
Yeah.
I
think they do. I say that with a good dose of humility that Everton aren't too big to go down. Because I do feel like, you know, if things carry on the way they are, then Everton will go down. But just Everton Football Club in the Championship doesn't sound right.
No, it doesn't. And I'm not saying this because you're on or whatever, but I've always looked at Everton like history, big club, and just to have them down there and even in the conversation is just, for me, ridiculous. So even the thought of them being in the Championship, they've never been relegated from the Premier League. So it's like, yeah, it'll be a massive shame. But yeah, I think they shouldn't even be in the conversation that we're having right now. So hopefully moving forward, you do stay up and you kind of start doing what Newcastle are doing, because I think that's your worthy place in the league.
That Everton Leeds game is going to be massive.
Huge game.
Massive.
It's at Goodison, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, must win. Must win.
Yeah.
But yeah, Max, it's been an absolute pleasure. Obviously, Everton's been spoken about all season, and obviously we wanted first-hand opinion and views on it. So we thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Oh no, it's a pleasure, lads. I really enjoyed talking with you, and it'd be great to get you on my own podcast if you'd be up for it at some point.
Whenever you want, Max. Whenever you want.
All right, boys.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Max.
Nice one.
See you later.